Thrasio as a business model, to me, is almost like a perfect story, but with a completely flawed business model. Consumer companies should be the Thrasios of India, and not the Thrasio models which have evolved.
So the house of brands thesis works, right? But is it a function of building patiently and then establishing it step by step, where tangible synergy kind of gets built out over time, whether it's distribution or category ownership or whatever? Or is it something else? What is the lesson for founders and investors when there is like a wave like this and everyone is just dying of FOMO?
If overeating kills, hunger doesn't. It's almost like for a VC fund, you would say that, overcapitalization sometimes can hurt you a lot more than undercapitalization.
But if you were a founder, in the post-COVID era where there's a lot of capital coming in to consolidate businesses, how would you do it if inorganic was the way to go?
Acquisitions in India is extremely tough.
In 2020, I'm sure if somebody would have come to you and said that मैं 3 brand बनाने वाला हूँ day one pitch पे, so you would have said भाग जा.
While I run a consumer fund, I personally don't think anyone's going to become Unilever in India in the next 10-15 years.
Hey guys, welcome to a fresh episode of Asymmetric. This is episode 20. I have with me my one regular partner in crime, Chirag. We don't have Revant. Unfortunately, he's traveling and a little unwell. But today we have a power-packed episode with one of my favorite investors, board members, mentors, also ragger-in-chief in my life generally. We have Nikhil Vora, who runs 6th Sense Venture Partners, one of India's first consumer venture fund, 5,000 crores in assets, and I have benefited immensely as a founder in his portfolio, and very privileged. He has had tremendous success as an angel investor and of course been running 6th Sense for 11 years now. Today we have the rise and bankruptcy of Thrasio and what that business model led to in India. Chirag has an update on JusPay and what's happening there as well. Also, by the way, between Revant, Chirag and I, we're always wondering what is the core metric that we should follow. Anand Lunia ragged us on the last episode because our views are too low, and Revant is very happy with it because he says it's okay to compound on a slow baseline as long as you're compounding. Chirag and I are of the opinion that views as well as view duration is important. So we want YouTube to recommend this organically. We want you to put in comments anything that you feel about this episode, the last episode. Just give us feedback, guys. We come here every week with a certain amount of preparation, and hopefully we are valuable to you. So if you like what we do, if you don't like it, whatever it is, just let us know so that we can keep improving week on week, and hopefully we are able to deliver great content for you week on week. Nikhil, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Shantanu. Always a pleasure to be with you. And Chirag now.
So Nikhil, Chirag, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly share my screen and at least for our viewers run through a skeleton of the discussion, and then Nikhil would love to get your thoughts. Okay, so the Thrasio effect. What has happened to Thrasio-driven business models in India? Again, the disclaimer is we are not economists or experts. We are just observers. So that is what we always disclaimer some of these observations on. We don't want it to be gospel. Just a quick primer on Thrasio, right? And what Thrasio is for the uninitiated. Thrasio is a company founded in 2018 with a very clear and simple thesis that in the US, there are a lot of Amazon native brands. The US has a unique online retail ecosystem where Amazon is a significant, you can almost call it a kind of a quasi-monopoly. So if you become successful on Amazon, then it is very likely that you have become a large online player. The idea was to purchase Amazon native brands, use horizontal capability. So you have procurement, supply chain, marketing, content studios. There's a whole distribution, the whole amount of stuff that you can kind of share across all these brands. And then you can take small profitable brand and build them into global household names. That's the idea. You can buy, and it is called House of Brand. It is named a lot of things, but that is what Thrasio did. And this is 2018. So you have to kind of take your minds back 7 years. It's pre-COVID. Amazon was kind of really becoming a place where, a lot of Shark Tank US, for example, a lot of brands became 100 million plus on Amazon. So it was a good place to scale. And it theoretically made sense. Fragmented sellers, single platform. And a lot of times founders just, from an energy standpoint, founders just kind of lose out, right? So the need to kind of keep doing it year after year. Many of these companies were kind of reaching a place where founders were fatigued. So theoretically it made sense to kind of consolidate and build something larger. Insane in terms of capital, right? Raised 3.4 billion, including like a 1 billion Series D, I think from Silver Lake and Advent. Bought 200 plus brands and every category you could think of, from beauty to personal care to food, pet care, everything that you could sell on Amazon. I think Thrasio had some or the other representative. They would kind of go buy a company at 1 or 2x revenue. If it's a $3 million company annualized, they'll probably give $5 to $6 million to the founder, buy the whole company out. And the thesis was that if you take a $2 million revenue company, you can scale it to $20 million using your shared skills. And then, of course, because of the margin profile, you can kind of command a much larger revenue multiple if you're listing it or selling it. And that's how a 30 to 50x outcome would be possible at a value level. That is what excited people about the Thrasio model. Great founders, and it made a lot of sense. But like everything, right, when you try to grow too quick, I think the business faced a lot of expansionary challenges that I think were not foreseen to the extent, just given the optimism and the bull mindset of the investors, founders, and the ecosystem in general. Because a lot of this was over leveraged, right? Significant amount of aggressive debt, servicing costs ballooned, and it became difficult to service the debt. Second is, if you are going to buy a pet food company and a shirt brand and a backpack brand and something to in kitchen utensils, the complexity of multiple categories sometimes is just much more than the synergy of scale, right? Procurement, sometimes you can't just you can't have the same procurement team for buying kitchen utensils or electronic chargers, for example. You just need two separate teams. So synergies was not as much as people thought. After COVID, like 22, 23, people started going offline again, and digital CAC started ballooning, right? So Google, and this is well documented, Google and Meta became extremely expensive. And at one point, Thrasio had an inventory build up almost $750 million, right? Within a year and a half of its Series D. And demand forecasts were significantly off because his inventory was not selling, right? And of course, when a company starts, when they raise a lot of money and then a lot of these issues kind of come together, bad business leads to a lot of CEO churn. I think they went through 3 or 4 CEOs. Multiple people in the leadership team also kind of went out. Founder involvement became tricky. Boardroom hostility increased, and the usual suspect when it comes to a company where there's a lot of capital that's gone in, a lot of hopes, a lot of jobs on the line. Frankly, a lot of partners and principals at these investment firms must have felt the heat. The founders would have felt the heat. Team members would have felt the heat. Growth was not happening. So, just cultural integration became difficult to kind of, because it was not an old company. So typically institutional legacy sometimes keeps struggling companies together, but it was just a 4 or 5 year old company. So that also did not exist. And finally, in February 2024, around a year back, Thrasio filed for bankruptcy. So this is what happened to Thrasio, right? I think fantastic idea, theoretically made a lot of sense, lot of capital maintained, but just steroidal growth sometimes comes with challenges that people did not foresee. And COVID kind of added to that complexity, and the company kind of, for all practical purposes, ceases to exist. Because of the bull run of during COVID and a lot of mushrooming of online businesses in India, etc., I think we saw a lot of Thrasio clones in India. And I think this page, I just want to kind of give you a sense, right? Thesis was similar, not the same. Thesis was similar. India was a fragmented seller market. It continues to be. I think we have between 80,000 to a lakh plus D2C brands, new age brands across categories. We don't have a single platform monopoly of Amazon that the US has. We do have Amazon, Flipkart. We have large number of D2C in the ecosystem, Meesho, Nykaa, Myntra, and a long tail of platforms. So there is that additional complexity. Exits are scarce. Right? If there's a company that is doing, let's say you're running a shoe brand and you've reached, let's say, 2 crores a month of revenue, roughly 25 crores a month of a year of revenue, and a profit of 50 lakhs. So founders typically are not taking back a lot of money for themselves or creating dividends for their investors. And if you keep doing this year on year, growth is not there. Sometimes if an investor comes in and says, hey, I'm going to give you 50 crores for the business, which is 2 times revenue, and you're going to get 50 crores in one shot, founders might take that because it's a lot of money. Buyer, there's an opportunity to scale. So I think thesis was similar, that you could consolidate business, consolidate brands and hyper scale them if you have the foundational backing for it. And many companies did it, and some really, really solid executors have been there, right? So Mensa, for example, I think became a unicorn in like under 6 months, raised more than $300 million, I think between 10 to 15 companies, including India's largest peanut butter company, MyFitness, for example, right? Global Bees, part of the First Cry group now, so a lot of their results are public. Again, raised upwards of 300 million. A butternut company, Mush, Reach, etc. Good Glamm Group, kind of different. It wasn't the Thrasio model, but it was an inorganic acquisitive model, raised more than $430 million, acquired companies like Momsco, Sirona, Organic Harvest, including content company like Scoopoo, Baby Chakra, Popexo, etc. Upscaleo, again, raised almost $50 to $60 million and acquired companies across the board. Very good founders, Saim from Bain, Gautam from McKinsey, etc. 10 Club, Bhavna and team kind of did multiple pivots, raised 40 million. A lot of that was leverage to kind of go from, they tried to do earlier fashion brands and they went into electronic commodities and so on. And Goat Brand Labs by Rishi Vasudev, I think is a lifer in the fashion space. Again, raised 36 million. And Goat is the one company where I think they kind of really focused on one category, which is fashion. They knew that well, and they felt like if you could get fashion right, there is a higher thesis in terms of what can happen, right? But what has happened to these companies today, right? I think Mensa and Global Bees are the only ones that have really pulled through, frankly, right? But not superstar outcomes, right? Both have deployed between 1200 to 1500 crores, and both are between 1200 to 1500 crores in terms of revenue. So 1:1 in terms of capital deployed to revenue. Typically, you would expect at least 70 to 80% of those companies to have scaled well. But what has happened is few of the companies have scaled well, and we have seen an 80-20 happen in there where 3-4 brands out of 15 have really scaled and the rest have not, and that becomes a little bit of a problematic situation. Good Glamm upscale you in deep financial distress. I think you would read it in the papers, legal cases, payouts not made, all sorts of stuff that happens when capital runs out. 10 Club also in a similar boat and unlikely to survive from what is there on the internet. And Goat is of course raised a 21 million, kind of over leveraged round again in July 24. So kind of chugging its way along. But broadly, I think the thesis has not played out. What has happened to Thrasio in smaller ways has happened here. I think Mensa and Global Bees kind of continue to chug along. We're hearing news that, at 1500 crores, 0% EBITDA, a little bit of efficiency more, and they could kind of go public and kind of find a way to kind of build out a large business. But I think from my standpoint, there are multiple reasons why why the fizzle out happened and why we are not able to see it. Right? We need PE type outcomes in these situations. These were supposed to be operator businesses, but because of the time was so low, these are almost PE VC businesses, right? These are businesses that raised capital, deployed them, acquired companies and operated them. But the idea was almost like a buyout fund. And in that situation, a VC power law type outcome where only a few companies work, it won't work because all your resources go towards those 3-4 companies and 80% of your companies have to get written off. And that's just not financially feasible. And I think stable companies and stable rate cycles is where this kind of leverage works. But in this case, I think assets were nascent, small company, and the rate cycle turned fully because of COVID and post-COVID what happened in 22, 23 and so on, right? Fragmented platform base. Quick commerce added so much more complexity. I think the boom of quick commerce has led to a significant amount of complexity. Even single brands like us are really trying to work this out. A lot of bloated valuation. So a lot of these small companies, someone doing 30, 40, 50 crores a year, suddenly 5 companies are coming to acquire them. Of course, when there are a lot of buyers, founders will kind of raise the price. And because the buyers were so hungry for growth and so impatient to kind of acquire and grow, they would have kind of taken inefficient bets in terms of the price they would have selected to kind of acquire some of these companies. I think Good Glamm Group, I think the kind of price points they put on some of the companies were significantly way off. I think tremendous amount of optimism baked into the scaling there. Again, over leveraged, significant. I think 10 Club, for example, Bhavna has come on the barbershop. A large amount of the fundraise was debt, but because of increasing CACs and digital spend, debt servicing kind of really put stress on the P&L. And more focus on acquisitions rather than execution. That's what the news on the street is, that when the operating leadership team is so much more focused on deal making rather than actual operation, you can't take a business and 10x the revenue. It's not, especially when you're running one business in saris, one business in personal care, one business in perfumes and so on. It's very hard to kind of scale 10x. Like I've frankly been doing one category for 9 years, and while Nikhil might put this to competence, I think scaling businesses takes a lot more time. And of course, beyond all this, there are the obvious M&A issues. Even like significantly large companies, when they acquire, cultural assimilation, founder motivation after a large payout, legacy handover, relationships handovers. These are all things that get lost between the cup and the lip when acquisitions happen, right? So there's a lot of things that needed a lot of maturity, and sometimes companies don't have that when they're this young, and the fizzle out happens, right? And I think the questions that I would want to put for Nikhil and of course Chirag also is that the house of brands thesis works, right? So whether you look at HUL or even, and unfortunately we don't have Revant here, but you look at companies like Mamaearth, which have now 3-4 brands, Mosaic is building 3 brands. So the house of brands thesis works, right? But is it a function of building patiently and then establishing it step by step where tangible synergy kind of gets built out over time, whether it's distribution or category ownership or whatever? Or is it something else? Like, is it do you need a certain scale and institutional legacy for inorganic strategy to even stand a chance, right? Where you can go and buy something else and kind of make it work. The second question is, what is the lesson for founders and investors when there is like a wave like this and everyone is just dying of FOMO? And the third one is, I think, overall view on acquisition of startups, right? Once founders make life-changing amount of money, does the asset building desire still burn? Because if it doesn't, then the asset you're buying may or may not have the kind of value that you're kind of ascribing to it from a future standpoint.
Thanks, Shantanu. I think that's almost a complete wrap up about what works and what doesn't work in a Thrasio sort of model in India and globally also. Just to maybe supplement what some of the things that you've talked about, and I do have a different take in the end about possibly what it could emerge into. I think Thrasio as a business model to me is almost like a perfect story, but with a completely flawed business model. So I think if you look at the macro, it just seems just so plausible that that's the way markets should be, that there will be so many fragmented brands, not just in India, worldwide, more so in India, obviously, right now. And there is a need for a consolidator because obviously all these brands don't have an ability to grow beyond a particular threshold and so on. And you need a aggregator to emerge. So I think, and also the fact that, it's almost a given that you need someone to become the online version or a larger version of Unilever and P&G at some stage in life in India, because you can't also have businesses which have been built 7-8 decades back and still continue to remain the most relevant and dominant player in the country as we have today. So clearly there's a need for a house of brand or an aggregator model that one looks at. I think some of the challenges that I think were incremental to what you've also talked about is that firstly, like in any business, you want to look at the founders first. I know you did say that all the founders have been obviously fairly credible guys and so on, which they are. But, I think it's also a function about founders reaching out to a business or creating a business because of a trend that they see globally, rather than being seeped into that business completely. Almost all the founders that have emitted from this house of brand aggregator model that you look at, while they have great credentials, I think they were not seeped into the business. They address the market because they could raise capital on their creds rather than the business model. So the moment the business model collapsed in US or started to look like collapsing, frankly, they didn't have anything in Indian construct to reshape the business, to remodel it and take it to a healthier place. I think that was one big challenge. And I think we sometimes overextend founders' creds with the ability to run the business for perpetuity or for a long period of time. I think it just was possibly a FOMO in some form of saying that let me be the first guy or among the first guys in this category, and I will be able to raise capital and thereby solve this issue. So that was one, I think. Second was, I think, like in almost a lot of businesses that we all see, it's said that sometimes overeating kills, hunger doesn't. It's almost like for a VC fund, you would say that, overcapitalization sometimes can hurt you a lot more than undercapitalization. I think that was completely the stage for both Thrasio in US and for almost all the companies in India, which all of them were born in 2021, by the way. So clearly, getting capital of $3.5 billion globally or getting $1.5 billion in India, I think that was significant overdose of capital for a business which had not proven any merit. So I think overcapitalization at some stage really hurt. I think if you're overcapitalized and if you have a tenure within which you're going to deploy, like if we had a fund which was maybe $2 billion with no expertise of deploying the capital earlier, and we have the timeline to deploy it in 3 years, I'm sure, definite that we will make wrong choices. I think a lot of these underlying businesses made a lot of tough choices, I think, which in retrospect were obviously, I think, too early, too soon. The other part I would say is you talked about the Unilevers of the world and so on. I've seen almost all these businesses that you've listed out earlier. We've been very, very skeptical. And I'm not trying to take a brownie point on this, but, I've historically always believed, I've done more than 30 years in consumers. I've always believed that consumer companies should be the Thrasios of India and not the Thrasio models which have evolved. Consumer companies are the guys who understand brands, they understand distribution, they understand consumers very well. And the fact is that all these legacy companies have, ironically, not done much for the last 40-50 years. They've actually not created new categories, new businesses, and so on. So for them, this is actually the perfect model to scale the business further to where they are in a channel which is very different to what they've been historically used to, and to a customer base which is possibly slightly more mid-premium to what they've historically serviced, which was mass mid. So I thought that, Thrasios of India should have been the consumer companies in India rather than having an aggregator in that category.
Nikhil, when you say that consumer companies should have been Thrasio, you mean like the house of brand which is being done by Mamaearth, that kind of a model wherein expertise lies inside and you incubate brands because you know the consumer, that kind of model?
Oh, completely, Chirag. So think of it, right? Look at Purple Nika, and I'm no, these are slightly differentiated categories and their platform plays. But if today they decided to go heavy on house of brand within that category of BPC, I think they'll make a fairly successful category play. Mamaearth, obviously, because operationally they're involved in a category which is very deep and so on, or a Unilever or any other category which any other player which knows to operate how to handle 10 different categories, right? I think that to me is a far more stronger model. It doesn't diminish the existence of the model. It just changes the rule of the game to where the players historically thought the Thrasio should exist to where I think they should actually be.
Yeah, I think also you make a very valid point, Nikhil. I think there are two things when you look at companies in India that have kind of built out multiple brands, right? And when you have new age companies like Mamaearth or even Mosaic, what they did was Mosaic, for I wish Revant was here, right? They found one category, right? They found one space of supplements or kind of wellness, and they started with Man Matters, and then they went on to Be Body Wise, then Little Toys. But the thematic view on wellness did not change. So hence they had like a moat of distribution, procurement, etc. Ki boss, humko ye aata hai. So if Mosaic is creating this brand, then the starting point is very different. And if you look at even how Emami or Marico or Dabur, Vico, Patanjali have been built, they found their one space. They found their one big success. You found that one parachute, and then you did that for 10, 15 years. Then on that distribution, you look at Sanjeev Juneja with Kesh King and then the bunch of brand that he built out. Or you look at what Darshan Bhai has done, right? For him, the distribution was, he knows every wholesaler like a brother, right? So now, whether it's Fog or he's selling 5 other brands, that mode doesn't go away. So the starting point is different. For example, Nikhil, when you raise thousands of crores, you take 7-8 years to deploy it, right? आप बोलते हो कि यार मैं इसको 7-8 साल में डिप्लॉय करूंगा क्योंकि मैं अपॉर्चुनिटी देखूंगा तभी मैं एंड आई विल ड्रॉ डाउन द मनी एंड सेंड. बट व्हेन यू रेज इक्विटी कैपिटल ऑफ दैट मच अमाउंट with a view that you will deploy it and create arbitrage valuation, then suddenly you're in pressure of now all of that stuff that will take 5-6 years in terms of moat building has to be done now, and then you're praying and hoping that it's only capital that'll do it.
Fundamentally correct. You mentioned this in your slide also, point number 2, that interest rates need to be stable. I think if you look at a P&L now, there are 3 types of leverage: financial leverage, marketing leverage, or operating leverage. I think what Nikhil is also trying to say, and you also alluded to it, that if you do the financial leverage business, then you end up making a very different kind of a business where you have to invest, you have to consolidate, you have to do M&A. Whereas what we are seeing has worked in India in the past also, and with these new age brands also, they are using both the other two, wherein they have marketing expertise, they understand the consumer, which Nikhil is saying, and then of course they've built operating muscle in terms of supply chain expertise, and which they are using to build out newer brands. In fact, one of the brands, Shantanu, which we have missed mentioning, I think Aditya Birla also launched something called TMRW, right, which is scaled decently well now.
Just one more point. I think what Shantanu you did allude to a bit, the horizontal versus vertical playbook that let's say Revant has done and a couple of other guys are doing. I think it's so critical to do that because think of it, right? Trying to access different categories which require different distribution channels, different customer base. There's actually no leverage. So you're just an aggregator without a leverage. You don't go deep in your distribution. You don't go deep in your price point. You don't cross sell to the same consumer. So fundamentally, there is no leverage of that business model at all. So every business has to do well. In consumer business, the biggest moat or biggest advantage of consumer business is that, once you've cracked the consumer, like I keep saying this in my analyst days also, that, ITC is such a powerhouse of distribution that even if they sold junk in that distribution, they'll make 100 crores. Yeah. So it doesn't need to do anything. It just needs to push product in that distribution. That's the muscle. With these companies, they actually had no muscle technically. So, if technically you had the money right now to build a similar house of brands, you'll say, okay, can I go vertical deep? So can I, if let's say I get into category like supplements, which I think can be a great category. Can I do sportswear? And can I also do gymming equipment, which can all come together and say that I'm becoming a DCAT in online, offline, whichever model you want. But I'm competing against a DCAT there. But I will aggregate because I get a jump start and so on. I think that still makes sense. But to do 10 different cats, to be a Unilever and a PNG and a DCAT and maybe a Nilkamal Plastics, who knows? They're into almost all spaces, right?
Yeah.
Someone bought a ladder company, for instance,
Yeah.
right? It's just a bit bizarre.
Yeah. How would you have done it, Nikhil? Let's say you were a founder, and let's say you had to build because I agree with you. I think theoretical success of such a business model, it is, I think, impending. Someone has to do it. I think there will be one or two companies in this case, and maybe Mensa is one of them, or Goat or TMRW is one of them. If you were a founder, in the post-COVID era where there's a lot of capital coming in to consolidate businesses, how would you do it if inorganic was the way to go?
I'll tell you one thing, Shantanu. In my 30 years of investing, I've obviously developed strong biases towards a lot of businesses saying that this does not work, period, right? But the good part is that you keep getting challenged about your own thesis every time. And that's why you keep meeting founders, keep seeing businesses all the time and so on. And sometimes a lot of businesses that you have a bias and hopefully it turns out that way, it takes 3 to 4 years to clean that bias. Let's say a Baiju dies, it kills the entire education space
Correct.
for the next 3 years, right? Independent of how good you do offline, even if you're an offline model, it has nothing to do with edtech as a space and so on, but you will get challenged. Thrasio is similar. I think it's taken maybe now 3 years or 2 years for Thrasio model to technically die, or people to say that this does not work. But I think the model has, like I said, it has merits. Like a WeWork, right? It also had a big challenge globally, but that model makes sense. It's not that people don't want to have these models. So I think Thrasio is also a prerequisite. It's just the way you conduct yourself. So, if I had to bet on it with someone doing it, because obviously we are not operating guys, if someone from a consumer space came and said that, oh, we love these 2 categories, which we think we can go deep in, because I've managed 10 categories in my organization earlier, and I know that I can get a kickstart. I know how to handle businesses. I know how to merge the businesses. I know omni-channel well. I know offline distribution well. And I don't need to now incrementally create a 12 million retail outlet reach, which is to compete with Unilever. I don't need that at all. I need to crack 15 distribution channels in India now. I need to crack Zepto, Blinkit, Insta. I need to crack Flipkart, Amazon. I need to crack DMart, Reliance, and maybe another 5 guys. Frankly, that will give me 15% of the coverage of Unilever, which is super if I can crack that day one. If there is a business which aggregates that and a founder who's execution heavy to do this, I think that would be interesting. So like I talked about the DCAT example, about something which will be pretty much in the similar band of businesses that you look at, which is aggregating one particular category or 2 particular category. I think that's not a bad playbook at all. Because the interesting part is also that almost every tier 3 challenger brands or businesses are fundamentally now at a scale which is relatively decent. These are all businesses which are 25 to 100 crores now. So it's not very, very fringe. They've hopefully seen 3 consumer cycles in terms of 3 times consumer coming and buying you out. That means the brand has some stability. First time people experiment, they don't even know. Second time people maybe are just trying it out again. Third time if they're buying, then the brand is relevant. So I'm presuming that at 100 crore revenue or 7500 crores, you're becoming in that threshold. So I think there's salience of the business and so on. So I wouldn't completely rubbish it out, but I would look at these salience before I would look at wanting to invest in something like this.
How do you deal with funding acquisitions? Because either you create it and do 0 to 1 on your own, or you acquire. And if you're going to kind of either you give out equity or you give out cash, and I'm assuming you'll need to raise a certain amount of capital, whether it's through equity or debt, to do that. And without the institutional legacy, which let's say an HUL has been around for 100 years. So it has the institutional legacy to absorb. It has large teams. It has, it's easy for it to acquire, let's say, a GSK for 30,000 crores and to have the courage to merge it into its business, because there's a stable, but if it's a first time, it's a 2-year-old company, 3-year-old company, 1-year-old company, then it doesn't have that, right? So would you say that if you're going to give it capital, it should be like a VC drawdown over a period of a few years, so that at least then the IRR math is easier and you don't put pressure to grow like that? Or would you say, no, yaar, like that?
Firstly, let me talk on your GSK example or Unilever example. I think it's been a complete failure on Unilever.
I was saying having the courage to do it.
Well, ironically, Shantanu, while the world might think like that, I don't think there was courage at all. I think what they did fundamentally was swap a asset which was available at 5x revenue to a asset which is at 7x revenue. So they did actually just that. And I can tell you with some certainty, that's fundamentally what they did. Has the business grown after the merger? They've not been able to grow that. So frankly, they've not been able to. But anyway, that's
HUL with food has struggled in HUL in general. I agree with you.
It has. So that's one. But anyway, again, acquisitions in India is extremely tough. Normally entrepreneurs in India, and both of you guys are entrepreneurs. They sell down only when they know that there's no chance of getting the business to a recovery path. So all of us have gone through a period of downswing, and if you believe that you have an ability to turn it around, you'll continue to remain sticky and then turn it around. The businesses which are acquired completely are businesses which the founder has already given up completely. right? And then to believe that someone else who has possibly very little understanding of that business will be able to turn it around in a material manner is a fairly tough ask. So I think it's important to have the founder skin in the game, while if you have to do those acquisitions in a category which you believe in as a principle. Now, would you fund it completely? There's also no point in funding a business half-hearted. You don't do it because you think you improve your IRR over a period of time. I don't think that's really the thought at all. Even as an investor, I wouldn't think of it at all. I think if you're funding a business, you think that you have the belief in it completely and go full hog. And trust the founder and believe in the founder that they know capital allocation the way it should be done, and measure it up and so on. I think doing it in half measure and underfunding a business significantly is also not a great journey for either the founder or for the acquired company. So you're not giving it justice anyway. So
a lot of large companies, a good point actually. A lot of large companies are trying to do this, by the way. Like this whole digital Unilever thing, which Darpan used to kind of talk about. I think the idea has a lot of merit. So I think companies have found a way. At least large companies with large balance sheets have said, you know what, we're going to experiment with this. I think the future is here. Let's get a solid leader, get a bunch of really good founders and brands that are proven, and see what this separate business. Marico, for example, has them play. The physically sitting in another location. Tries to get the team culture completely kind of intact from. So I think people are seeing the merit, but I think again, maybe the balance sheet strength and the ability to fail is much higher as opposed to a new operator getting a lot of money and kind of and doing it.
The only difference is that all legacy consumer businesses, and let's say there are 15 of them, have the ability to only do 2 acquisitions in 3 years. They can't do more than that. You have one-off cases of a Tata consumer doing sporadically, some of them, but they fundamentally don't have ability to absorb more than 2 acquisitions in 3 years.
And why? Because it means it's like finance overhead or it's balance sheet overhead.
No, I think it's just about categories, right? 2 acquisitions are 2 different categories. That's not the zone which any consumer business will be in. So there is still a flux of newer businesses which fundamentally can be absorbed by some different players. Yeah.
Interesting.
Sure.
So Nikhil, I was just thinking that how times have changed. In 2020, I'm sure if somebody would have come to you and said that मैं 3 brand बनाने वाला हूँ, day 1 pitch पे, so you would have said baja. Building one itself is so hard, and now it's become quite real. I'm sure Mama did plan for it day 1. They of course have had a journey, but that's clearly times have changed, wherein at least OG VC is saying that House of Brands internal capability is the, at least legitly sounds good.
Yeah, I think the anchor brand, the city, in my view, the anchor brand has to create modes of some kind. Like for Darshan Bhai, Fog has to do it. For Revant, Man Matters has to do it. For Mama Earth has to do it. For Honasa, right? Those anchor brands have to create that mode, and then around that you have to find ways to kind of have, because otherwise sab ek saath bahut tricky hai yaar. I think wo thoda, you have to, like, soldiers have to enter the door one by one only.
I agree, but I think in that case, it also might pan out over a 10-year journey that, let's say, a brand 2 or a brand 3 might become larger than brand 1.
Correct.
But it will be sequenced because that too anyways is a different, this thing.
In these cases, the companies that we've discussed, the sequencing and the time crunch and pressure of capital driven by FOMO, I think. And that's what I wanted to ask you, Nikhil. I think you were an investor in the heydays of 2021 where these kind of businesses were getting funded left, right and center. I'm sure you and the team would have also kind of been tempted to dip your fingers in the wave. But how do investors and founders kind of deal with it? Like when there's like an influx of cap, it's hard to say no to capital. Frankly, I think Chirag will agree with me. As founders, it's really hard to say no to capital. If someone's giving you a bloated valuation, like it's very nice and good to say कि नहीं, be conservative, leave money on the table, you don't grow into it, etc. लेकिन अगर कोई term sheet दे रहा है, तुमको बोल रहा है 2 हफ्ते के अंदर wire the money and get going, why would you not, right?
Shantanu, very tempting, but on the other side, not tempting at all on investing in those Thrasio models, but very tempted to figure out if some of our portfolio companies can actually monetize for founders, for us as stakeholders, because clearly that was just too good to be true and last for a long period of time. Now, eventually, obviously, we have a fiduciary responsibility to optimize returns that we would do for our investors as much as we would want it to do it for our founders and so on. So never been tempted there because, frankly, I thought we had a bias and which has been pretty okay so far. But I completely understand, Shantanu, that even for founders and fairly strong founders like yourself also, I think we've had instances in Bombay Shaving where we've had more than one offer from one of these Thrasio sort of models that we've looked at.
Yeah.
And like you rightly said, it's tough to say no when there's a term sheet or a money in the bank in 2 weeks. And for founders who've possibly not historically created a lot of wealth, it's good to create one core saying that, okay, now I've got my $50-100 million with me and so on. It's tempting for sure, but you need to figure out which side you want to be at. And for a founder also, because a lot of these businesses over a period of time then figure out that giving out capital did not make sense. Let's swap it. And that's where it started to drain out. People figured it out that this actually does not work at all, because there is a bloated value and you're buying an asset at almost at rev or at almost at cost from the founders. Just did not make sense for anyone.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And these things tend to crumble very quickly, Like, I've noticed, like, within 6 months, like, there is a massive tailwind. Everyone's talking like this is the hottest thing in town. And within 6 months, 9 months, suddenly there's a founder that doesn't get paid. The acquisition reaches the court. And then suddenly, like, it's immediate. It's insane how quickly the winds turn.
If you do well in a very short period of time. But if you die, you also die very young.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these businesses have fundamentally died very young.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, they had no capability, right? Beyond the founder. If you look at any of the CX, even the founder I'm saying is challenged, but let's say the entire CXO team, no one has experienced this model ever before. So they were very happy to go along with the founder's vision saying that, okay, guys, we got 100 million deployed in 5 categories, buy it at 3-4x revenue. That's good enough because we are getting 7x or 8x. But that can't be your mode, right? Because it just took one down cycle to, frankly, almost keep everyone in their birthday suits here.
I'm really hopeful, I'm still hopeful. I'm still hopeful that that there is a company that scales, and I'm maybe Revant, Varun, these are guys who can kind of really build out large scale businesses with multiple brands and build the digital Unilever of India. I think that's required very much.
Shantanu, I would continue to put you guys there. Bombay Shaving Company and Bombay at least are 2 brands already.
Yes, we are raising capital right now, so we are telling all our incoming investors ये एक brand business है. Because I don't want, because क्या होता है ना, if you say 4 brands na, then they will start saying, अच्छा ये brand इतने value पे ये, so sum of parts becomes less than the whole यार. But with Bombay Shaving Company and Bombay also, we are very clear that hair removal, even across procurement, whether it's razors, trimmers, shaving equipment, etc. We don't want, like, Bombay to get into beauty, you have to do it very smartly through styling, etc. or fragrances. So you're right. I think figuring out a way to keep scale intact is important. Is very
Interesting.
important.
I think, Nikhil, you touched upon 2 other points also, that why do, let's say, good MnAs don't happen in our country. Right?
Mhm.
Whenever a business is going down, then only it comes up. I'm sure you have been part of many board meetings where offers have been made. But is this more to do with our psyche, or there is more to be unpacked here? I'm generally curious, when there is slowdown, typically, globally they said M&A activities go up. But it doesn't go up so much in India, whereas at least what we were discussing, that fragmentation should lead to more consolidation. So why does it not play out?
So, like I said, I think there's always an optimism bias which all of us are born with, right? In generic, I'm saying all of us are born with, and entrepreneurs a lot more because they need to have that bias anyway when they start life. So I think till the last, they believe that there will be someone who'll give them capital, someone who'll crack distribution, someone will, they'll figure that out.
Yeah.
And that's the time when they start to, when the panic happens, that's the time when they look at exit. But by the time they look at an exit, the business does not exist. Almost always. Yeah. So that's why whenever you look at acquisitions which have happened, either they've happened when the businesses they've just been brand acquisitions rather than anything else because there's nothing much there in the business, or they've happened in categories where OEMs or principals or legacy companies have ended up paying a disproportionate value for their asset. Yeah, because they've done well, they are not desperate. So it's now become a seller's choice, not a buyer's choice. So minimalistic, if one has to name one, is in that position. You've seen a couple of brands getting acquired by ITC, and Dabur acquired spice business. It's where there is no seller, there's no buyer's choice in it. It's a seller's choice when they want to exit, right? Then they can demand the value which they want. But in most cases that you see, which are acquisitions which are very subscale businesses, by default, fundamentally there's almost zero value or very negligible value that the seller is getting out of it.
Yeah.
You mean
Also, I think
seller market में गया तो value नहीं है. It should be more inbound, wherein there is then value can be generated. But the point is then, when it is going good, and founder has a vision that, okay, I want to do this and change the world. And if it is going good, that also is a tricky one, wherein you get an offer and you're doing well. And then everyone around will say, abhi ko bechna hai. Abhi to there is so much to do. You have capital, etc., etc. It's a very tricky situation, and have you seen founders accept offers during that time? How have they thought through it? Any examples here would be super helpful.
Very, very tough. You're right. When businesses start to do decently well, and I'm assuming decently well is at least a threshold of 500 crores, right? Or some number like that. Then the vision is, okay, now I can crack IPO. I can really go to the next layer and so on.
Yeah.
So very tough for them to sell down at that point. But I can also tell you, Chirag, that, I was at one of the conferences with Sachin was there, sorry. Sachin, and I was telling him that, even the best founder with the best of business eventually sold out. So he thought about monetizing, maybe at a completely different scale and so on, but he thought of monetizing. So to me, the messaging also was that entrepreneurs today, independent of their pedigree, independent of where the businesses are, at some stage will fundamentally sell down. Very, very few, I think less than 5% of successful founders will live through the journey of 20 years plus. And that's why I personally, while I run a consumer fund, I personally don't think anyone's going to become Unilever in India in the next 10, 15 years. Purely because no one's willing to live through that life cycle of next 30, 40 years. All entrepreneurs are thinking of the next 15, 20 year of journey at best. And if entrepreneurs think of a 20-year journey, then as an investor, my journey with the entrepreneur is not more than 1/3 of that, which is 7 years, 8 years, or maybe 10 years at best. So how does someone build a business which is going to be built because of a very longevity-driven thought? It is being driven by slightly more short-termish measures, because the fact is that, every entrepreneur, founder, I'm sure Shantanu would look up to a lot of other guys, you'd look up to other guys saying that, oh, that guy's made $400 million, exited, 100 million, exited. I need to make my first 100 mil and before I get back to entrepreneurship and so on. So I think that's the challenge which I think we need to figure out more important, bigger one.
Nikhil, when you say that you have a fund life cycle of 7 years, which is typical, and if you have to build a 40-year long one, then I think you need to have patient capital. My answer to that would be that, okay, as a company, some business unit should start throwing out cash. Otherwise, raising or, getting a 15-year, 20-year long capital in India is also very, very hard.
Because, for example, any venture funded founder, Nikhil, will always have like 50-60% of the company owned by by institutions. And how do you give exits? So either you have to IPO or you have to sell. There is no way you can dividend out the IRR for institutional investors who hold so much capital, so much ownership in the company, right? So someone told me an interesting thing the other day. 60% of our business is held by investors. Tomorrow, if someone has to acquire the business, you just have to think about taking the 60% and giving it to someone, letting them consolidate the revenue, and make sure that you own stock equivalent to 40%, so that you at least. I think that's an interesting way to think about it. You can keep the company as is while getting acquired also. But you're right. I don't know how many people will have the patience to do that. And on the other hand, Nikhil, I'm sure you have seen founders, like traditional founders who still own 60-70% of their company when they go public also. So IPO के बाद भी 55% ownership है promoter के पास और बेचना नहीं चाहते वो मतलब. And then there is that breed of bootstrap guys, 20 years, and they're like, boss, this company is my identity and I will build it out. Now we want 200 crore, 400 crore, 1000 crore, whatever might be the case. There's a lot of that. So maybe there are multiple models, right? So
both sides, but Shantanu, think of this, right? Haldiram's. Yeah, super cash machine, right? Fundamentally, even for them, they'll figure out their journey saying that, okay, the existing founder has created so much wealth. Maybe the next generation may not. And Haldiram is just an example. I'm saying it could be anyone, right? Maybe the next generation may not. And thereby I need to create a value which is more tangible. So I think, and then, Chirag, to your point, right? That you need very long-term capital. Now, invariably, then you need a SoftBank sort of capital, which is saying that, okay, you take whatever capital you need. And I know that I'm not valuing it fair for that asset. I'm overvaluing it maybe by 5x or 10x what the fair value of the asset will be. But I'm willing to play the entire change in consumer behavior, habit, or whatever. So build a Paytm and thereby take the fright from other players to even fund anyone who's competing with them. Right? So you build a business for the next 10 years. The irony of those models is that one change and suddenly everything can crash around you or can come back. So when life cycles are short, I'm not saying our fund cycle is an issue. I'm not even alluding to that. I'm just saying in generic, if founders are thinking of a business for the next 20-25 years at best, then as an investor, because you are just part of the journey, you're not the journey, you're not going to play the entire playbook, then he can't be more than 1/3 of that life, right? So
a very good point. That is such a good point.
I think another point which you were mentioning around the a founder market fit, at least what it is, the word which is being used. You mentioned in the Indian Thrasio cases also that these have been founders who are instrumental in raising, but not so much. But how do I've had these different successes in different companies. There are founders who don't come from that space, and there is value to it because you operate it from a point of view of first principle. You challenge assumptions and then you crack. Right? I've seen many of those successes. And then there are spaces where you would say, okay, this founder knows, let's say, consumer, this founder knows commerce, and hence you would, say that. What's been your learning there? Is it that you back founders who are mostly, founder market fit is there, or is there any other principle you follow? Have you seen success there?
I think both work. I think the good part about India is that, frankly, okay, in my mind, I think so. I'm sure these numbers may not be true at all, but in my mind, I think there are 100,000 ideas which are funded in India. There are 1,500 great founders whom you would want to partner with. So if earlier founders had to be great thinkers and then they had a team to execute, today entrepreneurs have to be great thinkers and they have to be great execution guys also. So it's 2-in-1 rolled out. So I think there are only 1,500 such guys in India. So if we crack one of the 1,500, we are very, very happy to do it. Now it could come from across the sector, right? So like Shantanu, he was not a born entrepreneur, right? He's obviously got his ropes done and so on, and then said, okay, I want to create this model. But one could feel the confidence in the person. And it's also, I think, the only test that we have when we are investing, Chirag, is whether, beyond the two other things that we have, but one thing is that whether we like the founder's face. I think it's very, very important for us that we need to like that guy's face, whether we like the credibility of the guy, whether we think we can go along with him for the next 7-8 years or 10 years, and whether he's 6 months ahead of the curve optically. Now, these are all qualitative aspects. There's no chance of us quantifying it and so on. But the more you keep meeting, the more you hopefully get it right. Yeah? So I think Shantanu comes in that bucket. There could be another bucket of founder who's done it earlier, but as a professional. So let's say we backed a guy called Sudeep, who runs a company called Uppercase, which is a luggage company, similar to Mokobara. So Mokobara, Uppercase are the new age challenger brands to VIP, Samsonite, and so on. And the guy was the MD CEO of VIP Safari for 15 years, Samsonite for 15 years. So he knows what VIP cannot do. He knows the trade very well. He knows what he needs to do differently to crack this business and so on. And he's done it. In 18 months, it's a 100 crore plus brand. So you get both shots, but I think it's important to get the founder grain right.
अभी लोग आपके पास स्पावा करा के आएंगे.
स्पा नहीं, बॉम्बे शेविंग कंपनी का शेव करके
ट्रिम करके. We need
such a valuable point of view actually, like, because the amount of information you have when you're deploying capital I always used to I never understood how difficult it is until much later that there's such little information you are going on, especially as an early stage investor, and the kind of pressure you have as to be a kind of stakeholder of capital is insane. And so little information, little control, maximum responsibility of returns. मतलब बहुत ही different. Your life is unenviable, frankly.
Yeah. मुझे इंटरव्यू लेते हुए लगता है that we are judging because लगता है marginal utility now is not increasing at all. Is not at all increasing. We still take some of those bets where at least ये वाला question हमारे पास भी आता है कि let's say you want to get someone who knows his subject really well, or you need someone with a lot of promise hunger. I have seen people with a lot of promise hunger win if they are supported with this knowledge expertise. Maybe that's what at least Nikhil, you are also saying that 1,500 hungry, passion driven. If they have knowledge, great. Otherwise, they'll figure their way out. That's the winning mantra.
Amazing. This has been amazing. See, do you want to quickly go through the JusPay news?
Yeah, I think I'll just quickly bring that up. I think Nikhil was anyways mentioning, SoftBank, and SoftBank happens to be an investor in both JusPay and Paytm. There is apparently rumor
Nikhil was an angel in Paytm, by the way, one of the earliest investors of Paytm.
There is.
I sold the moment they became more regulated entity. This is good to sell now. So I sold it 4 years back.
Nikhil mental model is super clear. Consumer, non-regulated, where your brand can influence decision making. Interesting. No, I think there is this at least market conversation rumor that all of this is sparked because there is this large SoftBank shark investor who has missed the PG bus. They were never investors in PayU, Razorpay, and they want JusPay to become the next big PG. What has happened interestingly is, I think we covered it a few episodes ago, wherein JusPay is an aggregator wrapper which provides orchestration services to e-commerce, commerce merchants, and underlying them there are these payment gateways, which is a Razorpay, PayU, cash free, etc., etc. As a merchant, the utility which I drive is that you can manage your success rates, commercials, etc., with different people without doing newer integrations. Like integrating a payment gateway is a hassle. So it's a beautiful stack which they have built out. Now the challenge, I think, or the curveball which happened probably 3-4 months ago was that they applied for this payment aggregator license to RBI. JusPay's got it, and I think everything was okay till they decided that they're going to use that and get into that kind of business. So now what has happened is, I think January, both Razorpay and Cashpay decided to pull out of the arrangement with JusPay and decided not to offer their services. They gave everyone 3-month notice. Yesterday, we heard that Paytm also announced that they're going to move out. In between, what has happened is there was a round which was getting staged. I heard that round is now getting lesser valued. It was supposed to be at $1 billion valuation. Now it's getting at 600. And then, we heard that VCs did their due diligence and realized that merchants actually need the solution. So JusPay, the round is again getting done at $1 billion. But it's very interesting from a point of view of, how the payment industry is going through it, wherein the other one is trying to get to the payments business, and the neutrality. And what interesting thing JusPay has done is they have open sourced their aggregator software. Why they have open source, in my view, is that they want to keep that separate and ensure that there is neutrality and offer their payment gateways separately. Because in absence of that, what has started to happen was that everyone has a wrapper, right? So Razorpay has their own wrapper, which is the same as JusPay. Paytm has one, Cashfree has one. Now, when JusPay also became like that, everyone said that, okay, to a merchant, that you want a wrapper, take ours. Because JusPay was no more neutral. I think they are trying to separate the two things. My sense is merchants definitely need a wrapper, but it is very interesting in terms of how does this play out from a PG point of view, that are they able to take share from some of these existing PGs? And by the way, in India, PG is a 10 basis point business, right? Because UPI is not monetized. So it's a large infrastructure which gets created, monetization under pressure, which leads to all of this, in my view, that revenue pools get marginalized, and hence everyone has to get into each other's business. JusPay is my sense is they do some crazy numbers. I think $600 billion of TPV, but there are 2 or 3 base business. So PGs are thinking that, okay, we should get the wrapper business also. So it's very interesting move. I hope, and my wish is that merchants don't end up suffering on this, where they have to move and, there is revenue loss, all of that happens. But it's very interesting the way, it has unfolded in the last 3-4 months, where I never thought that a listed company like Paytm also would decide that they don't want to participate. It is definitely, advantage for some people. So let's say if I was PayU, I would definitely want to get more market share via JusPay. So some of those things are yet to play out. Let's see how it goes.
Sorry. Very, very, very interesting, yaar. Very interesting. What do you think? What will you put your money on? Kya hoga?
In terms of, let's say, how this is going to play out for the merchants, I think, my sense, my read is that merchants do need the layer. So there is a need for a software. It should ideally be neutral. It should not be in conflict. Let's say it shouldn't have their own PPG. My initial first hunch was, is there a space for a second JusPay? People have burned their fingers at the moment. So it might be difficult to convince some of these PPGs, but the space, I think, is emerging naturally. Right? But there is no one who's built that kind of a stack. So good part is that there are, I think, interesting thing from my viewpoint is that JusPay is a very great technology team, right? They are deep tech. I think they now have a very commercial board, is what I hear, who are pushing them on some of these paths, which I don't know whether they wanted to go to. So it's interesting. I think some of these partners, as long as merchants want it, they don't have an alternate. So PGs are commoditized. Somebody else will fill up the gap.
Yeah, agree. Awesome. Before we move ahead, before we close, I think Nikhil, what are the last 2-3 minutes on what is top of mind for you? I know Sixth Sense is always in the midst of a lot of action. You're always in the midst of a lot of action. But what's going on? How are you seeing the ecosystem? I think Sensex is bouncing back nicely. So I don't know whether it's a more short-term myopic thing, or do you genuinely see like a lot of the worry that was there a few weeks back slightly more allaying, or how do you see?
Frankly, Shantanu, that's possibly amongst the top 10 concerns that I would have. That's possibly 100 plus. So it's nowhere in the radar. By default, when you're investing in private businesses or early stage, in whichever form it is, you assume that there will be one or two down cycles in that business over a 6-7 year journey that you hopefully participate in. So I don't think we really look at that at all. So we're not trend investors anyway. So I think that we'll ignore. What I think is interesting is that the disruption which we thought will happen in India when we launched Sixth Sense, which was India's first consumer fund, when I moved out in 2014 and set it up, has become so much more real now. So, we've obviously, as you know, we've raised capital almost 4 to 5 times every time we've raised the next series of capital. I think part of it, hopefully, is because we've delivered, but a lot of it is also because that disruption, which was optical when we launched, has become so much more real. That today we are managing 5,000 crores of domestic capital. It's all INR money. So it's the largest INR capital fund in India, which is non-grandfather. So we're not a Sequoia subsidiary or a India Influx subsidiary, right? So, apni dukaan hai. So it's done reasonably well on that. But I think that, the big opportunity, which we've talked about it a bit, is that India in consumers specifically, it's the second largest market in this country in terms of absolute numbers. So it's obviously very large. It's still extremely duopolized in its own nature, which is bizarre for 30 states, which we call 30 countries, 30 different consumer behavior. Yet there are 2 companies which control 80 to 100% category share in almost everything that you look at. And almost 65% of wallet share is focused on the top 15 companies in India, which is again bizarre. So I think that disruption, which was earlier only on brands, is now going to the entire ecosystem of creating a brand, which would mean manufacturing, supply chain, distribution, logistics, warehouse, MRO, and so on. And that's the big opportunity that you're looking at. And the second layer, which I've always think about that, for example, I've seen Unilever right from Dadi Seth to now Rohit. Even today, every quarter when they speak to investors, analysts, they talk about market share gains and losses in a particular category. That's the obsession that they would want investors to think of. So they'll talk about cleansing at a category and they controlling, let's say, 58% category share in soaps. But what they lose purpose, and they'll keep saying about this every quarter, that 58 becoming 59 or 57 and so on. But they lose purpose of the fact that cleansing has moved from soaps to face wash, face scrub, where they have a 15% category share. So you are maintaining market share, but you're losing wallet share. And I think that's a big disruption still there, right? And that's where challenger businesses, brands evolve and so on. Also, media was earlier completely controlled by the legacy companies. So 10 years, 12 years back, not too far, right? 92% of media spends were in broadcast and print. Today, 55% of media spends are on, Insta, Facebook, and OTT platforms and so on, which is a completely different layer of consumers that you're talking about. 10 years back, again, less than 24% of the Indian consumption was at the mid to the premium end, which means 75% of the consumption was low income mass, which is where the entire legacy business was focused on in terms of product, positioning, pricing, and so on, and distribution. Today, 51% of Indian consumption is mid premium. In the next 3 years, rather, not today, in the next 3-4 years, 15% will go mid premium, where legacy companies have no product line, no products, no pricing, no attribute which they can go there. So I think great opportunity for a lot of businesses like ours to disrupt and take a very relevant share of this emerging new age consumer.
That's incredible. That is incredible. So India story is strong. I'm very hopeful that every VC, and I think start seeing 1 to 2 IPOs per year in their portfolio. I think that's very important for this ecosystem to really mushroom and become very large. And I hope that Nikhil, like we talk about Bombay Sharing Company a lot. I think Chirag with GoKwik. I think we taking these companies public over a period of time, and for founders to find an ability to do that, I think will unlock a lot. Not only capital, but also in just general belief that this is now real, like you say. But yeah, Nikhil, this has been amazing. Again, I'm conscious of your time, so we are letting you go 8 minutes before.
No, Shantanu, thanks so much. It was lovely being on this. And Chirag, thanks so much. It's great to be with friends. I think that's more important, and very happy to see your success also, Chirag.
Thank you, Nikhil.
Yeah,
I'll come in Bombay.